It's now my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Ellen Kennedy. Ellen is the founder and executive director of World Without Genocide, which provides education about past and current conflicts and advocacy for policies and legislation that promote peace and justice. Ellen is an adjunct professor at the Mitchell-Hamlin School of Law in St. Paul, Minnesota. Ellen is an extremely gifted leader and has received numerous awards for her work, including Outstanding Citizen Award from the Anne Frank Center in New York, Community Service Award from the University of Minnesota, and the Changemaker Award from the Minnesota Women's Press. Ellen serves on many local boards and nonprofits and is a past president of both the Minneapolis University Club, to which she now belongs, and to the Rotary Club of Edina, where she served as president during the 2009-10 year when the presidential theme was "The Future of Rotary is in Your Hands." Ellen has a BA degree from the University of Michigan, 3 master's degrees, and 2 doctorate degrees from the University of Minnesota. Please help me welcome to our Zoom broadcast my friend and fellow Rotarian, Dr. Ellen Kennedy.
Thank you, Josh. I now need to try to get to share screen. Here we are. The title of my talk is "We See You, Jew, the Story of a Personal Attack." "We See You, Jew" was the subject line of an email I received a few months ago. And the message is what you see on this screen. "Misusing the name Kennedy doesn't hide what you really are from everyone, Tuckner. Put on your yellow star." There was no signature, no traceable email address. The sender was anonymous and invisible. I was neither anonymous nor invisible. The sender was threatening that I should wear a yellow star like the Jews were forced to wear during the Holocaust. I am a Jew. I wear a Jewish star around my neck every day. I identify strongly with my Jewish heritage, the history, the culture, and the religion. Years ago, I married a man named Kennedy, and I took his last name, which was typical at that time. My maiden name is Narodsky, not Tuckner. My grandparents came to the US from Vilna, Lithuania in 1903, long before the Holocaust. My relatives who stayed behind in Europe were exterminated by the Nazis. I don't know why I received that message. Maybe it was because World Without Genocide, the organization that I direct, had held a program at Mitchell-Hamlin School of Law called "From the Nazis to the Neo-Nazis." Maybe it was because I had an article in that morning's Min Post newspaper excoriating the rise of neo-Nazism. Or maybe it was just part of today's climate in the US and in Edina as well, and I was a visible target. Being identified as a Jew today is being increasingly dangerous. I'll tell you the story about Tanya Gersh, one story of many. Tanya was threatened with assault and death over and over again. She's a real estate agent in Montana. She is Jewish. She was targeted by followers of the Daily Stormer, a far-right neo-Nazi website advocating for the genocide of Jews. In 2016, the website's founder, Andrew Anglin, incited his followers to harass Gersh. Gersh, her husband, and their 12-year-old son received nearly 1,000 messages filled with vitriol and including death threats. Like these: "Thanks for demonstrating why your race needs to be collectively ovened. You have no idea what you are doing. 6 million are only the beginning. We are going to keep track of you for the rest of your life. Hickory dickory dock, the kike, Jew, ran up the clock. The clock struck 3, and the internet Nazi trolls gassed the rest of them." The Daily Stormer also posted Gersh's personal information. This is called doxing, publishing personal information on the internet with malicious intent. The Daily Stormer also listed the names and contacts of other Jews in that area, called on readers to take action against them, and threatened a citywide neo-Nazi rally. The targeting of Jews is not only a US phenomenon, it's a global poison. Liliane Segre, in the front, is an 89-year-old Auschwitz survivor and a senator in Italy. She receives an average of 200 online threats a day from far-right extremists. Last year, a teacher in Italy wrote on Facebook that Segre would do well in a nice little incinerator. The attacks increased after Segre proposed a parliamentary commission to combat racism and anti-Semitism, and she now has a police escort everywhere. In France, Mireille Knoll, an 85-year-old Holocaust survivor, was stabbed to death in her own apartment in 2018. People joined in a massive rally of unity against France's anti-Semitism. What are the French doing to protect Jews? They're doing a lot. In France, after the 2015 Paris slayings of 17 people at the Charlie Hebdo magazine and at a kosher store, and after Mireille Knoll's brutal murder, the French government launched Operation Sentinel. They deployed 10,000 soldiers and 44,700 police around Jewish community buildings and other potential targets. The French state bears the security costs, about $1.2 million a day. And the posters that people are holding at this rally read, "I am a Jew." And these signs are held by people of all faiths. Where does this hatred come from? At the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, in August 2017, neo-Nazis from around the country marched and shouted, "Jews will not replace us." And we'll take a quick look at that rally. Jews will not replace us is the mantra of the conspiracy theory white genocide movement. And the marchers also chanted "blood and soil," which had been Nazi Germany's nationalist slogan. The marchers here carried swastika-decorated flags, and they proudly raised their arms in fascist salutes. Almost every segment of the white supremacist movement from across the US was represented at that Charlottesville rally. Heather Heyer was murdered at Charlottesville by a neo-Nazi. White supremacists have committed at least 73 more murders since Charlottesville. In October 2018, a shooter killed 11 Jews who were at prayer in a Pittsburgh synagogue in the worst act of violence against Jews in this country's history. The shooter told a police officer that he wanted all Jews to die because Jews were committing genocide against his people. The Pittsburgh shooting was followed 6 months later by a shooting in a California synagogue in Poway, a city near San Diego. The shooter made a 911 call minutes after fleeing the scene. On the call, the shooter said, "They're destroying our people. We're not going down without a fight. I'm defending my nation against the Jewish people who are destroying the white race." These shooters are referring to white genocide, the white replacement or white extinction conspiracy theory. Neo-Nazis and other alt-right groups believe there is a Jewish plot to overthrow white Christian rule and to make whites extinct. Now let's put this in perspective. Consider this. Jews are 2% of the US population. They are 0.18% of the population of the entire world, less than 1%. The proportion of Jews in Germany in 1933, when Hitler came to power, 0.7%. The percent of Jews in all of Europe in 1933, 1.7%. The Southern Poverty Law Center monitors hate groups throughout the US and litigates hate crimes. The SPLC reports that the number of hate groups in America climbed in the past few years to a record high of 1,020 in 2018. Most of these groups are white supremacist and neo-Nazi, and they perceive the Jew, their label, as their major enemy. As the number of hate groups has risen, the FBI shows a corresponding increase in hate crimes over the past 3 years. There were 7,120 reported hate crimes in 2018, a quarter of them motivated by religious bias, and more than half of those were targeted against Jews. That's a whole lot of hate directed at a small group of people. And most of these crimes were crimes against persons, not crimes against property. These were violent physical assaults. Now, I mentioned these data are based on reported crimes. Actual figures are much higher because state and local police forces are not required to report hate crimes to the FBI, and many do not report. Hate crimes are the highest priority of the FBI's civil rights program. Why? Because of the devastating impact on families and communities. There are currently over 850 open FBI hate crimes investigations across the US. FBI agent Michael Melcher recently spoke to the Edina Human Rights and Relations Commission about these crimes. He encouraged our community's active reporting. Christopher Wray, shown here, the national FBI director, said in recent testimony to Congress that 2019 was the deadliest year for domestic terrorism, in particular, white supremacist terrorism. Just days after his testimony, the FBI charged a white supremacist in Colorado with plotting to blow up a synagogue. A recent headline in the Minneapolis Star-Tribune posed the difficult question: when is a crime a hate crime? There's disagreement among law enforcement personnel nationally and in Minnesota. At this meeting, photographed in St. Paul, Ramsey County Attorney John Choi said, and I quote, "People are now coming to the realization from a community value perspective and by people impacted by racially motivated crimes that these are significant harms." Attorney Choi is right about the harms. Synagogues and other Jewish community buildings are resembling fortresses. Before the pandemic, I would go through multiple security checks just to get to the gym in my local Jewish community center. Years ago, I simply walked in. Local synagogues have exponentially increased security budgets, policies, and procedures. Drew Evans, the superintendent of the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, suggests that officers need better training to spot hate crimes. Otherwise, he said, assaults or threats end up being counted as that, depriving the public of a chance to uncover worrying trends in growing hate. I belong to a group called HIME, Children of Holocaust Survivors Association in Minnesota. At the last two meetings, pre-pandemic, people talked about their fear of going to synagogues and other Jewish organizations. Being in a place with many Jews makes them, us, easy targets. These people grew up knowing of their parents' horrific histories, and today they experience profound trauma in this climate of anti-Semitism. U.S. Attorney Justin Herdman, a member of the Department of Justice Terrorism and Security Subcommittee, rebuked white nationalists. He said, quote, "Threatening to kill Jewish people, gunning down innocent Latinos on a weekend shopping trip, planning and plotting to perpetrate murders in the name of a nonsense racial theory, sitting to pray with God-fearing people whom you execute moments later. These actions don't make you soldiers, they make you criminals." Some people are standing up to these threats. Tanya Gersh brought a civil suit against Anglin, alleging that he had intentionally inflicted emotional distress. A federal judge at the U.S. District Court for the District of Montana ruled that Anglin's harassment campaign was not protected against free speech, as he claimed. And in 2019, Tanya Gersh was ordered by that court. Anglin had to pay $14 million in compensatory and punitive damages for cyber harassment. It's a federal crime, and it's also a crime in many states, including Minnesota. Anglin has fled the country and will likely never pay, but this was a watershed outcome. Tanya Gersh was threatened with assault and death over and over and over again. I received that one message, and it terrified me. I cannot imagine what it was like, the fear that remains with her and her family forever. But she stood up. Some of the perpetrators of these atrocities have been punished. Over 24 of the marchers from the Unite the Right rally are serving long-term prison sentences. Others have been deplatformed, banned from social media sites. Others have civil lawsuits like hers. But the neo-Nazi movement spreads like a virus through online recruitment and propaganda, including hate music, hate videos, podcasts, and even political campaigning. What does that Daily Stormer website look like? Before it was deplatformed, I was able to take a look. This is what you would see. The Jews destroying your country through mass immigration and degeneracy. The scourge of the coronavirus has also bred the virulence of anti-Semitism. White supremacists are blaming the pandemic on the Jews. And they also urge their members to spread it to police and to Jews, according to FBI reports. Now, I've talked about the impact of anti-Semitism abroad and in Charlottesville, in Montana, in California, and in Pittsburgh, but let's bring it home. There have been at least 9 incidents in Edina in the past year where swastikas and racist graffiti have appeared in public places. I live here. Can you imagine how I feel? I just finished my 2nd term on the Edina Human Rights and Relations Commission. In my 6 years as a commissioner, I've heard from people who live, work, study, or visit Edina, and some of their difficult experiences with hate. But I also have heard wonderful stories. Our city is part of a program established by Harvard School of Public Health and the United Nations called Human Rights Cities. These cities around the world choose to promote city policies that advance human rights for everyone. Edina is the only city in Minnesota that is a human rights city. It doesn't mean that we are there. This is an aspirational designation. We take human rights seriously, and not just for some, but for everyone. We aspire to be better, to be inclusive, to stand up for the least in our midst. Today, I'm sharing a very personal story, but I represent only one of many vulnerable minority groups who are targeted by hate, discrimination, and often by violence. I was terrified when I read that email targeting me, telling me to wear a star like Jews persecuted under the Nazis. I contacted our local FBI office that morning because they track every incident to be able to try to predict significant acts of domestic terrorism. I also contacted the board chair of World Without Genocide. I was worried about our safety, the safety of our speaker the next night, a Holocaust survivor. If I'm a target, imagine his vulnerability. And we modified our security at that event. A few weeks later, we held a public program about hate speech and the First Amendment. Our speakers were the Muslim director of the Council on American-Islamic Relations, the legal director of the American Civil Liberties Union, and the Jewish communications director of the Jewish Community Relations Council. They were concerned about their security, as were we. So we didn't use their names in any of the publicity about the event at their request. And again, we tightened our internal security. A few days after I received that email, I wrote an article about it and about the scourge of neo-Nazism for the St. Paul Pioneer Press. I felt that since I already had a target on my back, I couldn't make it much worse. My husband's first comment the morning after it was published was, "Well, no bricks through the windows last night." I feel vulnerable. And I'm here to ask every one of you to stand up and to speak out when you witness acts or hear words of discrimination or hate, and to do it calmly, quietly, and safely. Befriend the person or the family being treated without dignity and without respect. Report all incidents to the Edina Police, to the Edina Human Rights and Relations Commission, and to the Minneapolis FBI. Tanya Gersh stood up, but she said she could not have endured without support from wonderful people around her. Be one of those people. Our annual gala was scheduled to be held on Tuesday evening, May 12th. It's now rescheduled for late fall. The venue, the Edina Country Club, a place where Jews could not belong for decades. Edina Mayor Jim Hovland, when we have it in the fall, will introduce our honoree, none other than Tanya Gersh. Jesse Kingston, an African-American Jewish Edina resident and former chair of the Edina Human Rights and Relations Commission, will present Tanya with our award. I hope you all will be there to applaud her courage to stand up against hate. I also invite you to tell young people about our annual 3-day Summer Institute for high school and college students, which has received the Minnesota Ethical Leadership Award. It will be held in August, either in person at Mitchell-Hamlin School of Law, where it's been held for 9 years, or remotely. We are building tomorrow's human rights leaders today. Thank you.
Ellen, thank you so much for being with us today. Would you have a few minutes to take some questions from the audience?
Of course.
Okay, let's, why don't you raise your hand, participants in the participant chat. We'll try that. And I'll call on you individually. I think, Hannah-Laura, you have a question? Go ahead. Hannah-Laura, take yourself off mute and ask your question.
Ellen, and
go ahead, Hannah-Laura.
I want to just tell you, Ellen, that I come from Germany, and this persecution of the Jewish people was always on my shoulders. So to counteract it, I gathered all the brave men and women. I have a whole library for people who resisted it, like Dietrich Bonhoeffer,
yes,
who was honored by the Jewish people. And I'm actually proud that he is in my family tree, and he's one of my heroes. I just wanted to let you know.
I have a poster of Dietrich Bonhoeffer's very famous poem in my office.
Oh, that has been set into music by Mr. Ferguson in Minneapolis, by the way, and I have the copy of that, and I have it's also it's in many hymn books, and all the Germans know the last verse by heart.
Hannah-Laura, thank you for what you do, and thank you for being with us today.
Katie Campbell, you got your hand up. Do you have a question? Katie Campbell, do you have a question? Okay, Mike Callis, you got your hand up. Do you have a question? Katie, are you back on? You want to ask a question?
I'm on. Hi. I just wanted to, a comment to thank Ellen for being here and for your bravery and what you're doing and honoring us with your presence here in Rotary. Wonderful work you're doing.
Thank you for
Thank
those
you.
very kind words, Katie. It means a great deal.
Again, if you have a question, go in the participant chat and just raise your hand. Mike Callis, you have your hand up. Do you have a question? Mike Callis? Okay. Anyone else in the group chat? I have a quick question. So, you know, this is such a disturbing topic, just to know how close to home it is. And I've heard about the swastika. I think there was something even more recent than that that happened in Edina. But other than law enforcement, what are the major movements combating this growing hate? And we know that the political climate in the United States has charged this and allowed this to creep out from under the rocks. But what else is going on to counteract this movement throughout the world, not just maybe here in Minnesota with your work, but what are other people doing?
I think the single most important thing is to make this from the grassroots forward, so that everyone every day, when they hear things that are, as I said, disrespectful, unkind, hurtful, calls those comments out for what they are. At the Edina Human Rights and Relations Commission, that has been the message that we have tried to communicate. First, these efforts really require everyone. We have to say, this is not who we are as our community, and we have to act on that. If we in our families, in our faith communities, in our own communities and neighborhoods, get this message across such that people who are those trying to bring those alternative messages of hate understand that their voices are being silenced, this is how we can make change. It must happen from the bottom up. We must hear everyone's positive voices.
And then Jennifer Bennerock, can you answer this question? Is there, aren't there some resources for reporting incidents through the city? What are the tools we have locally?
There are. Thanks for that question. We recently hired a race and equity coordinator. Her name is Heidi Lee, and residents are welcome to contact Heidi to talk about any concerns or to file complaints. She also, within the last month, launched a form on our website. So for those people who are not as comfortable talking one-on-one with a person, they can submit a form on the website. I think the biggest and frankly one of the most exciting changes I've seen in this area in many years, both Jim and Ellen can talk about the city's bias offense response plan. That we've had that for a long time, and the plan really is around hate crimes. But there are many other incidents in our community that aren't criminal. The swastika last summer that was done in chalk on school property was not considered a crime because no true property damage occurred, but it had the same impact in our community. So changes the Human Rights and Relations Commission are working on is a bias incident response. So that would address things like the chalk swastika, and the bias offense, which would address those that are criminal, so that it's clear in our community none of this is acceptable.
I want to back up a little bit, because by the time something like that happens, an incident has already occurred. Someone's human rights have already been aggrieved. And the important thing is to create a climate such that those events do not happen. The city of Edina, for the first time ever in the comprehensive plan, integrated a chapter on human rights into that city plan and developed a focus on human rights for every single aspect of city effort. Now, we are the only city, to my knowledge, throughout the state that has done this. And as I indicated earlier, we also are the only human rights city in the state. We are beginning this grassroots effort to try to raise greater awareness about the salience of these issues. One swastika is one too many, because the impact of something like that has repercussions that affect people deeply, grievously, and forever. So by institutionalizing these procedures in our own community, we begin to formally acknowledge their importance. Wherever I go and I speak about these issues, I mention what Edina is doing as a way to encourage other cities to become human rights cities, to incorporate a focus on human rights in all of their city strategic designs as well. This is the bottom-up effort.
Thank you, Ellen.
I'm very honored to have been with you today, and especially that all of you stayed for this very, very long but very special meeting to learn about Zoom and to hear about these challenges. This week is a special week. 2 days ago was Holocaust Remembrance Day, and the month of April is Genocide Awareness and Prevention Month, officially designated such in the state of Minnesota in the year 2013. So Josh is to really be commended for acknowledging this week and this month with a focus on these issues today. Thank you, Josh.
Josh, you're on mute.
Okay, before we finish up here, Joe Hayes, you had your hand up. Did you have a question for the speaker? Mr.
I
Hayes?
just wanted to say how great it was to see Ellen again. She did a great job as a member of our club and president. She really led us in a great direction. And one thing is, she's got a lot of courage. She has so much courage, and she's so wicked smart. And she never really stutters either. So you know exactly where she's coming from. But it is so disappointing in this time. We still have these, ignorant cowards out there that are saying those type of things and behaving that way. And hopefully, love can overcome those. So we just got, as Rotarians, keep on doing the things we do, and hopefully we can overcome those. So it's great to see you, Ellen.
Thank you so much. Great to see you too, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments, Joe. So let's do this. Here's the website, just was showing you earlier, where you can report bias or hate, race and equity subpage of the city. And then let me tell you this, Ellen, and you may know this already. Rotary is a global network of 1.2 million neighbors, friends, leaders, and problem solvers who see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change. From literacy and peace to water and health, we are always working to better our world, and we stay committed to the end. In honor of your presentation today, we will make a donation to Rotary's official disaster relief partner, ShelterBox, which provides emergency shelter to families devastated by natural disaster and conflict around the world. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what's coming up. Next week is, we're going to return to our Facebook Live format as we host our virtual Vocational Ethics Day, featuring a lively discussion between ethics speaker John Rubishko and moderator and Eden Prairie AM President John Crudelli, who joined us for the call today, as they look back on John Rubishko's federal mortgage fraud and the lessons he learned from that experience. Tune into our Facebook page at 12:35 p.m. to catch this broadcast, and also remember it will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube within 24 hours of the event. The following week, on Thursday, May 7th, we will be Zooming again with fellow Rotarian Jerry Norton of the Brookshire Company, who will be giving us an economic update, and in particular, the effects of the pandemic on the commercial real estate markets, including his predictions of how this will reshape the retail, office, and industrial real estate sectors in the future. Then finally, on May 14th, John Kaufman from H2 Open Doors will be flying in from California, or maybe Zooming in from California, to talk about some of his recent projects with the SunSpring solar and wind-powered water purification system, including a recent installation at the Escuintla National Hospital in Guatemala, where we visited on our Guatemala service trip in April of 2019. The rest of our calendar social events like the Walker, our Vocational Day at the Discovery Nexus Center is all TBA at this point, and we'll certainly keep you posted as things move on. As we close today's meeting, I'd like to share a quote from Eli Wiesel, a Romanian-born American writer, professor, political activist, Nobel laureate, and Holocaust survivor. Wiesel authored 57 books, written mostly in French and English, including Night, a work based on his experiences as a Jewish prisoner in the Auschwitz and Buchenwald concentration camps. Wiesel also helped establish the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. Wiesel said, "There may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time where we fail to protest." Bridget and Ellen, thank you so much for participating in today's program and being our Zoom guinea pigs as we introduce yet another piece of technology to our membership. And many thanks to the rest of you who Zoomed in with us today. I do look forward to seeing you in the flesh soon. As you go about your week, remember that together we see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves as Rotary pursues its mission to connect the world in meaningful ways. We'll see you next week on Facebook Live at 12:35 p.m. Meeting adjourned.